Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brewing a Better Workplace Culture, addressing sexual harassment challenges in the industry. The craft beer industry is built on passion and collaboration, but as we all know, that challenges can arise, especially when it comes to creating safe and supportive workplaces. Too often, breweries lack the resources and tools to address harassment effectively. That's why we are here. This session, in partnership with WeVow, is designed to give you practical, actionable strategies you can take back to your business right away. Now, let's learn a little bit about our guest. So, we've got Bill, co owner of Rising Storm Brewing Company in Rochester, New York. Bill is a seasoned executive leader in human capital management, leading service and operations at organizations during periods of high growth and evolution. In addition, Bill has a passion rooted in craft beer that started out with a small 5-barrel brewery called Rising Storm, founded in 2018. From then, Rising Storm has significantly expanded, including the opening of a much larger state-of-the-art brew house as their second location in 2023. Next up, we've got Opal, strategic advisor at Human Capital Management. Opal is an expert technologist with over 20 plus years of experience in developing HR payroll software solutions and bringing them to market across various industries such as healthcare, manufacturing, retail, hospitality, and more. Opal is also a vocal advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, talent recognition, and transformational workplace culture. And last but not least, we've got Scott, president of WeVow. Scott is an expert on building extraordinary workplace cultures and setting the right example from the top down. His leadership spans decades across various industries where he's devoted to helping organizations leverage technology to engage and deliver exceptional employee experiences that convert into exceptional guest customer experiences. We're going to learn a lot from those three today. And now I'm going to pass it over to Bill at Rising Storm to get us going. So, Bill, it's all
All
you.
right, right on. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the introduction. I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic that I care a lot about. I have a lot of passion behind what we're going to talk about today. As Andrew mentioned, I'm both a brewery owner and an executive in corporate America, which gives me a little bit of a unique perspective and angle on some of these topics and just running a business in general, which I'm really excited to talk a little bit about as we dive in here. In a lot of ways, we're going to draw some comparisons of craft brewing to the general hospitality and restaurant industries as a whole. We know there's a lot of things that make craft beer great and different than those things, but there are some similarities. So sort of as we navigate through this, just know that while we often don't tie ourselves to the hospitality as a greater industry, we're going to do some of that. But those uniquenesses are really probably why a lot of us got into what we do in the first place in the craft beer industry. Craft beer is defined by its emphasis on quality, flavor diversity, small batch production. Really, we try, I think, in most cases, distinguish ourselves from mass-produced commercial beers. The sector is experiencing more changes, and I think that's something we've continued to see time and time again. And since I first opened a brewery in 2018. I don't think there's been 2 years that have been even close to the same that we've seen from growth to the pandemic to some of the current challenges that we're seeing. But consumers continue to seek out craft beer, seek unique, artisanal, locally sourced types of places. And we really pride ourselves in the industry on things that we're known for: flavor and innovation. I think that's a huge part of what we do. We like to experiment with unique flavors and styles at Rising Storm, and I know many of my peers across like that as well. Authenticity, local appeal. I think that's another thing that is really a differentiator in what we do in our business. Health and wellness is a unique topic that we'll touch on a little bit. But there is a growing trend in general in our industry, as you probably see, for non-alcoholic or low alcohol, low calorie beers. We have the ability to adapt and sort of go with that change. And I think that's another exciting thing going on out there. Sustainability, just another practice that I think our industry does a really great job to excel at. So a lot of the things that we love and that make us great in what we do are also things that could potentially be risks, as we'll get into as we dive in a little bit here. As we maintain standards on our beer, we know our industry is all about making really great craft beer. We need to maintain standards on workplace culture, for our employees and our guests. So that's really where we're going to dive into today. So today we're addressing, a critical topic that affects really every brewery, regardless of size, location, specialty, whatever it is. We're going to talk about some practical strategies for sexual harassment prevention and response. Our hope in general is to make this an interactive session. But when you think about, so throughout the course of this, from an interactive standpoint, you'll see a few points where we're going to pop up some questions. If you're on the call, we would love to have you chat in answers. We'd love to make it interactive versus the 3 or 4 of us just kind of talking the entire time. But, regardless, we're going to start with a quick question. Does your brewery have a formal harassment policy? So we'll take a minute. Feel free to pop those into the chat. But, as you think about that and take a minute to go through that, harassment prevention is quality control for our culture. I really love that quote. When I think about the amount of quality control that goes into the liquid that we put out there, it's a lot. But at the same time, we need to mirror that energy and effort towards other things that are really important from a cultural standpoint. And the topic that we're on today is definitely one of those. With that, I am going to turn it over to Scott.
Yeah, actually, Scott and Opal. So one of the things that we were just, even talking about in our pre-panel discussions is that, while, this is such a very interesting industry, safety is one of those things that matter. And I think you hit it on the head, Bill, when you said, you put all of this pride, into, creating, excellent beer quality, likewise, we should also be doing the same, for, when it comes to workplace safety. And the reason being is that, even though craft beer is really like a subsegment, of hospitality in the sense that there is a shared DNA, right? And then that shared DNA is being very, intentional about creating those welcoming spaces, like you said, Bill, and enhancing that guest experience. Like that's where you really want to be. You have a culture of openness and, and accessibility. And all of that openness also does necessitate, protective boundaries, right? There still needs to be certain boundaries in place. And if the environment is not fundamentally safe, as well as respectful, not only for the team members, but, the staff in the tap room who brew the beer, and also the interactions with the public, that welcoming atmosphere is going to be compromised. It's definitely going to be a very fragile foundation. And so it's important that we discuss what are some of those safety protocols that are very essential, for the framework, as well as just being more genuine in hospitality, because we also want to thrive in the industry. And speaking of industry, there is a huge vulnerability, right? And especially with also what you're producing, we were talking about your craft beer. I was, jokingly, it's like, oh, liquid courage, it's sometimes there's a sense of some certain behaviors also tend to, surface, when some people have a certain affinity towards, alcoholic beverages. And so even with that, it's also very important that settings that like busy tap rooms, whether it's a crowded festival or any distributor visits, that whole social atmosphere, the consumption, as well as any distinct power dynamics is something that we also must be very, very cognizant of, that power differential that managers have with their staff, or what vendors have also with the staff, and as well as with what the customers also have with the staff. These elements, they create that environment for increased vulnerability, and we don't want those lines to be blurred. We have to be very, very intentional of recognizing as well as proactively addressing any of these complex operational realities. Scott, did you have anything else to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for setting up the safety issues. And the last thing I want to touch on is size does matter. And I think this topic is can be a challenging one to deal with. I think there's people look at larger companies that have more resources that they can utilize. What we wanted to do was emphasize the importance for the industry, and also strategies that can enable small and medium-sized businesses to effectively deal with this. There's a dangerous misconception that small businesses are too small for HR, and often the close-knit family-like environment that's common in these small breweries can inadvertently become too comfortable, leading to a blurring of professional lines and a reluctance to report or address issues internally. Regardless of the size, every organization is legally and ethically bound to provide a safe workplace. So implementing a clear professional policies isn't abandoning that family feel, but it's establishing a healthy, unambiguous professional boundary that's necessary to protect everybody in the organization. So on that note, Andrew, if you want to advance the slide, or sorry, there's we have a question that we just like to tee up as Bill had mentioned.
Yeah, so thinking about, these aspects, obviously why safety matters is something to also ponder about too. And if you, feel free to enter your comments in the chat, but what scenarios feel most vulnerable in your particular brewery? Everyone has areas where they focused on, but, not everyone has all bases covered. And so it's always great that we also take the time to think about those things and even also do that level of sharing within our network so we can actually, elevate each other. And so with that, we're going to talk through these topics. So Scott, do you want to just walk us through what we're going to talk about today?
Sure. Yeah, so we've got, each of us has taken a section. So we'll go through proactive prevention, programs related to that, fostering the welcoming culture. And then we have a responsive action program where we'll outline 5 steps that you can deploy so that you've got a program that can enable you to make a safer work environment.
Awesome. And then with that, I'll kick things off with the first one, proactive prevention, with the operative word being proactive. This is going to be very necessary, in order to foster trust, and bring it through with very, very clear directives. And even so much, it's like some people say they need goals. You don't need goals, you need a system. We need to put a system in place so that you're continuously, building on that trust. And so with that, there are some things that, we thought about, which will be very essential, especially for craft beer, is really taking the time to think through or even work with other, brewery owners. What are some of those zero tolerance policies, written in plain English? Like, it doesn't need to be legalese. These things just need to be really out there and just be very intentionally stated, right? So this is also a universal challenge, right? So even some regions, I spent some time also in Europe, that there's whistleblower protections. Even those also need clear guidelines where, in those regions, you may have a certain application, where people can be able to, like, hey, let me, submit something. Well, I want to do it in a way that's not I have to go talk to a manager because it might be the manager who's the one doing it, So there's certain things that you also have to put in place to be able to facilitate a certain zero tolerance policy, and also know what those things are. The second thing will be also about, having multiple reporting channels. Like, if your only reporting channel is, forces, a one-on-one conversation. With the age of technology, of course, that we're in, we can get, a lot more creative, whether it is, you have a Microsoft form, and that is a great way to just allow people to be able to enter something. And that form has a QR code, and you post that QR code in your staff rooms, or you even create a hotline or give it some type of like owner accessibility. But no matter what, it's really about removing the friction, right? Removing those barriers between the incident and as well as the reporting. And another one is, of course, the non-retaliation, that it has to be a promise. And with that promise is really about, hey, you're not going to get in trouble if you report something wrong. All right. And so giving people that safe space where they actually can be able to speak, that is a trust builder. This builds trust by, of course, encouraging that reporting and making it very real through consistent action. It can't be where someone is the moment that there's some type of retaliation that's done, that pretty much comes down like a deck of cards, right? Trust is not only current, right, but it's also your currency. It's your way to be able to, engage employees, right? If they feel that, okay, yeah, we had trust, but that trust is now broken. Trust is always has to be a relevant current thing, but it's also your way of being able to connect and engage. Now, leadership's role, you also have to model this, right? As an owner, or as a manager, show up, right? Model your behavior, show up, even understanding bystander intervention, how you want to facilitate the 5 Ds, and even practicing it. When we talk about the 5 Ds of just being a bystander, there's direct, right? And this involves just directly addressing the situation. Either that person feels comfortable enough to be able to speak directly to the person causing harm, telling them to stop, or even checking in with the person that was harmed, right? And seeing if they're okay. And of course, that is a method that only should be used if it's safe. If it's safe to do so and you're not in danger of escalating the situation and making it worse. The other D is distract. This is actually one I know all too well, just being out with my friends. This is more of like an indirect approach, to de-escalate a situation, and creating a diversion, just to interrupt if you see something or sense something going on, and giving that person that's being targeted an out, or a chance to kind of remove themselves from it. I've done things where I've spilled a drink, on purpose, just to be able to like ask for like, hey, can I have some help over here? Because something that I sensed, not just something that I saw, but something that I sensed, to create that such a diversion and allow, that person to break away from that environment or that scenario. Those are things that also can be discussed, when it comes to also, also delegating. This might mean, getting help from someone else, right? If a person doesn't feel comfortable, or safe, intervening directly, and maybe you can find someone in a position of authority, to be able to ask them to intervene on their behalf. There's all their ways to be able to get bystanders to, be a part of the preventative message. The last two talk about, one is delay. Sometimes there's things that cannot be done in the moment, right? And you can still help even after the incident is also over, or something that you sensed, or saw, by checking in on the person that was being targeted, or let them know you saw what happened, or make them feel that they have an advocate, or to validate their experience. And it helps them, feel a little bit safer and also less alone. And then last but not least is something that we are all too familiar with, which is document, right? The last of these is document. If someone else is already intervening in a situation, or if the situation is too unsafe for you to get involved, you can document the event. And the reason why I say this is all too familiar with our generation, because everybody flips out a video. It's like sometimes I'm a little taken aback where instead of intervening, they'd rather record, right? And so with that being the knee-jerk reaction, there's a lot of documenting that's definitely going on, which I'm also glad about. But at the same time, too, if you're also going to document, sometimes it's a great idea to just ask the person who was harmed in that and like what they want to do with the documentation before just openly sharing it, which happens also a bit recklessly. But these are things that, as a leader and modeling this type of behavior are things that are, pretty widely known, but they also can be addressed as well as follow through in your own craft brewing environment.
All right. Thank you, Opal. I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about fostering a welcoming culture. Beyond prevention, building belonging. A welcoming culture is one of the things I love most about what we do. It's why I love to go visit other breweries, visit other places. And honestly, it's one of the things at Rising Storm that we really we pride ourselves on, is really that culture. And it's such an important part of the overall environment, the overall experience that you provide to guests, but also your team members. So, we're going to talk for a minute about ways we can build an even greater sense of belonging, community, and culture in a really positive way. Having the right people in place, having the right tools to support those people that you have in place, and then kind of fostering that even a little larger from a community perspective. Fair hiring practices. This is something that in our day and age is just critically important for a whole lot of reasons, but not the least of which is really building a team that is diverse in perspective and views, and having people around you that don't necessarily all just think the same. That really helps us as individuals, us as businesses, and really anybody be better. When you have people from a variety and diverse background and diverse experience, it can really help accelerate your growth in the industry, but it can also just help accelerate the experience that you provide. Thinking about fair hiring practices, some things to think about. Structured interviews, going into an interview with purpose, consistency across the candidates that you're talking to, similar or same questions, really coming in with a plan and following through on that plan. I think a diverse hiring panel, or at least a group of diverse people to make hiring decisions, is really important. In small businesses, we often solely rely on us as the owner to make the decision. Sometimes we need broader perspective than our own to make some of those hiring decisions. Creating training that is really equitable, gives everybody an equitable opportunity right out of the gate. Making sure from day one, as you bring people in, you're giving them a chance to succeed. From an ongoing education standpoint, again, small businesses, we think sometimes we're too small for this, or maybe we don't have the right resources to do it. But regular training sessions for your teams on the topic we're talking about today, or really any topic for that matter, are really valuable for employees in any size business. Bringing guest speakers, cultural awareness programs, really encourage learning amongst your team members, making sure that they continue to develop, that they understand, that they broaden their perspectives on things. I'll say on this topic, really use your resources out there. There are so many resources available for businesses. Craft beer professionals being one of those. You probably have, our National Brewers Association, your State Brewers Association. I know ours here in New York is awesome. They do a lot of really great things for us, provide a lot of resources. So use the tools that are out there to be able to do this sort of thing. It doesn't have to be costly. It doesn't have to cost you anything, frankly, but leverage those to make sure you're educating your team and yourselves on really building a great culture and building a safe workplace and work environment. Community partnerships is another great way to kind of broaden your welcoming culture that you're putting together there. Partner with nonprofits for mentorship programs, leverage local diversity organizations, leverage partnerships that, you need to help find candidates too. There's a lot of organizations that you can tap into that can help you find a specific need that you might have, or a candidate of a certain diversity that, would help broaden what you do and the team that you have. So use your community. And I know that's something that our industry is really great at already. We are truly local, community-based. But when you think about this topic, there's plenty of resources that are probably available to you in your local markets that can help kind of broaden that. So with that, let's do a quick, another opportunity to ask a question. Would you consider a partnership to support diversity in your community? Have you thought about it? Is that something you would think about helping be part of that within your local community? All right. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who's going to talk about what to do when you need to respond to a situation.
Thanks, Bill. And we've established that a robust, clearly written policy is the necessary starting point. However, policy is only as good as the execution. When a complaint is actually filed, the business must pivot immediately from policy to practice. The next section that I'll lead us through will focus on the most critical phase of risk mitigation, the fair, prompt, and thorough execution of an investigation. We'll introduce the RAPID acronym. It's a straightforward framework designed for small business leaders to ensure they're responsive to reporting the incident. They're compliant and it's defensible what they've done. The actionable approach transforms a theoretical rule book into an effective proactive action. So with that, Andrew, if you could advance. Yep. So I'll quickly go through, we'll spell it out, RAPID, R-A-P-I-D. It's not a standard or officially recognized procedure for addressing it, but we found it to be very effective. And the response requires immediate, sensitive, and structured approach to ensure that it's a fair practice. So the first one is receiving the report. It's important here to listen carefully without judgment to the person making the report. And your primary role is to be a supportive, confidential as possible listener. So you need to listen actively, create a safe space for this to occur in. Do not investigate, reassure the person that you're receiving the report. You're not starting an investigation. This must be handled by proper authorities. And stay neutral and non-judgmental. Avoid expressing shock, doubt, or bias. And don't make promises you can't keep, such as guaranteeing a specific outcome. Next, you have assess the situation. So after receiving the report, you should assess the situation for immediate safety concerns and understand the scope of the issue. If there's anything that there's imminent danger, or you need to take steps to ensure their safety, which could entail calling emergency services, for example. Identify resources, clearly explain the available support options, including confidential resources such as a victim advocate or counselor. Also explain that non-confidential resources such as management or HR are available. And then clearly go over the reporting options and inform the individual that they can choose to move forward, such as filing a formal complaint, or they can take no further action. Make it clear that that choice is theirs. On that, we'll go on to the next slide. Next, for P, is preserving the evidence. You want to properly document the incident. It's critical for an effective and fair investigation. If the person decides to move forward with a formal complaint, the evidence will be essential. And here, what you need to do is document the details, record who, what, where, when the incident occurred, preserve any digital evidence, text messages, emails, social media, etc., and then retain any physical evidence. Note that any physical evidence, such as notes or objects, and advise the person to keep them in a secure, non-work location. Next, involve proper authorities. Inform the individual of the organizational procedure that you have in place for reporting and escalation. Involving the right people is critical for a prompt, efficient, and legally sound response. You need to follow the policy that you have in place. You need to reiterate that there's no retaliation. The HR director or an assigned person will make steps to ensure that the reporting party is protected from retaliation. Sorry, and then coordinate if you've got any legal counsel that might need to be involved with the incident. And then last, we've got document the entire process. And here you want to ensure that you've captured all of this, store all of these documents securely and confidentially. And then next we'll move into the RAPID framework is your critical shield against legal and reputational damage. Once the report moves from policy to practice, your immediate responsive action is the single most important factor determining the outcome. Remember that every investigation must be conducted by a neutral party to maintain fairness and credibility, and the subsequent corrective action must be prompt and proportional to the findings. Most importantly, you must guarantee no retaliation against the complainant and any witnesses that might be involved. By executing these steps and with consistency and integrity, you not only meet the legal requirements, but you're also able to reinforce employee trust and your commitment to creating a truly safe workplace. So thank you. And we can advance the slide. Now we have putting all of this together. So we've covered a lot on the call. We've outlined the essential components of a proactive protective system, from the clarity of your harassment policy to the precision of the rapid framework that we went through. The true power of the system lies in its unity. When a clear policy with impartial investigation and non-retaliation and mandatory training all work together, they transform a legal liability into a foundation of trust. The holistic approach is your investment in talent retention, brand integrity, and most critically, in the safety of every single person who contributes to your brewery's mission. By committing to this system, you don't just solve a problem, but you prevent them, you safeguard your business for the long term. And at this point, we'd like to prompt you to consider an action that you'll implement in the next 30 days based upon the topics that we've covered. Thanks. And I'm not certain whose slide this is.
Yeah. Well, I'll just kick it off. So, to put it all together, and thanks for saying that so eloquently, Scott. I'm glad that walking through, actually actionable steps, right? People can also reflect that they probably did some things kind of out of order too, and it's helpful that people were already thinking these things, but it's even more so helpful when they actually understand that protocol is set in a procedural way, to be able to put those safeguards and those guardrails in place and to follow through in something that's also repeatable, right? We know that, this was a great quote, Scott, when you said it in our pre-panel conversations, that every pint reflects our craft, every interaction reflects our culture, right? So we're brewing both, in this industry. And so it's important that we elevate our mission. The whole mission is to create that safe, enjoyable, environment where guests come alive and employees thrive. That's
Right.
That's what the success, I think, Bill, you really laid it out. Why you go into this business is really to be able to create that. And of course, it has to be, of course, an ongoing thing. And also level up the safety. You can have a fun environment, but you also have to make sure that, people feel safe, and that making workplace safety that top priority, it needs to be taken seriously, like OSHA. The penalties are out there. Honestly, you can chat GPT them and they're in the millions, right? And especially how long that they go on. Craft beer is not immune to any of those penalties either. So it's definitely in our best interest to make sure that even no matter small or large, that there's some type of procedural thing, steps in place to be able to address sexual harassment. And Bill, I'm gonna lead you to the last one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to follow up on what Opal just said. I mean, we've seen it in our industry before, and it won't be the last time. So we are not immune from this. And really, closing this topic out with lead by example. We've seen in this industry where the toxicity is at the top, and that certainly cannot be, and it can't happen. Really, and throughout my career in leadership, and as well as with the brewery, leadership is key. Lead by example, cast the shadow that you want. At the end of the day, you are the one setting the tone, setting the experience. You are the one leading the behavior for your organization. So model the right actions and the right behaviors yourself. Hold people to a really high standard of that. There's no place to not do that. Be the North Star for your team. And, I really can't overstate this. Set the tone for your brewery. I believe it all the way through to my core. This is just such a key part of being a leader and being someone that team members want to work with and work for and follow. So important. At the end of the day, when I think about the brewery that I have the privilege to be part of and run, aside from amazing beer and making really great food, our people are the key at the end of the day. And you set the tone for that through the people that you hire, through the example that you lead, and the example that you set. culture's key. People love to come to a place that they enjoy being at. It's a safe environment and welcoming for anyone that walks through the door. That's what we do. That's what we love to do and why we're in this business. So, make sure that you keep that up and model great behavior behind that and build that great culture for your organization.
Right. And I know Bill certainly walks the talk. He's got tremendous experience in the industry. And I made some notes as we were preparing for this of some words of wisdom that Bill seemed to put out on a regular basis. And one of the things I noted was that true dedication must extend beyond the liquid in the glass to the culture within the walls. And another thing that I made a note as we were going through this was that allowing your brand's commitment to excellence to be reflected in every pore and every interaction. So I think these are types of things that, offer the opportunity to, put a phrase up in a manual or in something on a wall or whatever to really, drive that home to your employees.
Yeah, I like the visibility of that.
Yeah. Good. So thank you for participating on today's call. The goal was to create a safe and compliant workplace that's not about damage control after event. It's about proactive risk mitigation and strategic investment. The financial consequences of inaction are severe: costly settlements, staff turnover, and the cost to your reputation. By implementing a clear policy, putting in place multiple reporting avenues, mandatory training, as we discussed, you transition from vulnerability to strength. And a strong culture is your most effective defense for protecting your team, securing your brand's future, and allowing your brewery to focus solely on what it does best, which is crafting exceptional beer. What we have, I'm with WeVow. We have a training offering that if you're interested in looking into that, we'll have a link following this is available, but also there's the QR code here that you can click on that. You can see the programs that we have in place that have been very effective and really dealing with this topic and making safer workplaces.
And everybody at CBP, we really appreciate our partnership with WeVow. You can learn more at wevow.com. And Scott, I appreciate you helping put this together. Opal and Bill, it's been wonderful to learn from you and meet you as part of this process. But now we've had a few comments come in over the past 40 minutes. So I want to ask you each a couple questions. So we're going to take them in the order that they came. The first is, how can a small brewery with limited resources create a comprehensive sexual harassment policy without hiring an expensive HR consultant or lawyer? Who wants to dive into that one first?
I can take a swing at that one initially. I think, I mentioned earlier as we were talking, like there are a lot of resources available. So, think about that a little bit. Certainly leverage your brewers associations for some of that stuff. There are government resources out there. So start with your state, maybe start with local government websites. They probably have templates and policies out there, so you can certainly leverage that. There's nothing wrong with borrowing. There's a lot of tools out there. Do some Googling. Chat GPT, I can guarantee, can help and has probably answered this question many, many times. That said, customize it for your own particular brewery, but there's great resources to be able to do that. You don't really need to retain a high cost lawyer or something like that to put that together. But there are some things that you can employ, whether it be someone like WeVow and some of the resources they provide, whether it be some of your HR and payroll companies probably have some resources that you can use. There's probably a lot of tools out there. I think the biggest thing that I'll say is just thinking about it and take that first step is probably the biggest thing that you can do, and you'll uncover a lot of resources that you probably didn't even realize were available. And then once you do that, get it out in front of your employees. That's kind of the key part. It's not just having it, it's making sure it's been delivered and every employee has it.
Right.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
I think those are excellent points. And I just wanted to circle back that the industry overall, and to expand beyond just breweries, but just hospitality has the highest instances of reported cases. So these resources that we have in terms, or that we've referenced in terms of government resources, sort of borrowing what's out there. WeVow has, some posters and documents that we're always willing to share with people, whether they're, customers or not. Puts you in a much stronger position so that you're it's more defensive, and that's why we're trying to get everybody to think proactively about this topic. And it's not that complicated, and it can be very inexpensive based upon the types of things we're trying to point you in the direction of.
Thanks, Scott. We've got another question that came through. This one is, what's a simple, low-cost way to make our sexual harassment policy easily accessible to everyone, including part-time staff who aren't on maybe a company email list?
I can take a stab at that. A lot of things, especially, this is really a culture question, right? And if it's a part of your culture to be, no nonsense, when it comes to workplace safety. And sexual harassment is one of those things. It's not just about, there's a spill on the floor and somebody might slip and fall, but I need you to take it there, right? The same way how you'll be very quick to mop that up, we also need to be very quick about responding to these incidents. And so if we look at this and put everything on that same level, that same echelon of workplace safety, it becomes more of a cultural embodiment more than anything. And so if that is a cultural embodiment, as an owner, this is a great place where you want your employees to be able to wear your t-shirt when they're not working, right? Like, this is something that you want to wear. You want to make sure that you represent, the company that you're associated with. And so it's more of a cultural play. So why I say low cost is because this is behavioral, right? Behaviors don't really change much, and you can go to Office Depot and even make some signs. If some of these quotes really is about who you are, your own identity. And you know what? Sometimes a rallying cry is also good too, right? That is really about that overall mission. And of course, workplace safety being paramount. So to me, I've always seen that as a very low cost thing, because this is really just about how you communicate and how you effectively, walk the talk.
We've had another question come through that I think is a really interesting one that I think many brewery owners definitely relate to. And that question is, how do you conduct a fair and impartial investigation when the only people available to interview are all close friends?
I'll take a pass at that. So this is probably the most significant challenge in a family-like small business. So everybody knows each other. You've got that culture that you've created that's part of your secret sauce for what you're delivering and the experience people are having. But what you need to do is you need to have it handled by a neutral party. So it can't be handled by the person's direct supervisor. What you have is, if there's an owner of your organization that's not operationally involved with the accused or the complainant, that they can come in. You can look at a third party if you've outsourced your payroll. Oftentimes, they've got some type of HR consultant that could assist with this. At WeVow, what we have is, we also have, if an incident is reported, we've got the capability of doing that for you. So there's different things. There could be a trusted peer or a neutral third party or a volunteer. There might be something in your state where they offer some type of resource for that. But the important thing is to really uncouple it from the person directly involved, because if you don't do that, you don't get a very good outcome. You can get a very bad outcome, and you also set yourself up for risk of not handling it properly and the consequences that come from that.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Does anybody else have any additions to that one?
No, I think Scott nailed that one. Really, the key is, especially as an owner that's involved with everything, make it somebody that's not you, and a little bit outside of that, I think, is a great practice.
Mm-hmm.
No, Bill, this question just came in. I think as a brewery owner, I'd love your thoughts on this one. And the question is as follows. What are some of the common mistakes small businesses make when investigating a complaint, and how can we avoid them?
Yeah, I think Scott kind of nailed a couple of them right there. But I think the first thing in this is like time. When something happens, there's a whole lot of reasons to respond timely. most of which is, to understand and make sure the victim or whoever brought something to you is taken care of. Part of it's just credibility. If you want people to come back to you next time they need to talk to you about something, like they need to know that you care and that you're willing to act. I think that's a big one. I will say in our industry and small businesses in general, documentation often really sucks. Like we're not great at it. You're out in the tap room or in the brew house, just having a conversation. Like documenting things is not an easy thing to do sometimes, but making sure that you record, however, just what's happening, what's being said. I think it protects victims. It protects you as a business. So I think that's part of it. I think, one of the things that is really hard, kind of ties into that kind of small family culture, is just respecting and honoring confidentiality. It's such an important thing, is to try to, keep control of that and respect that. For someone to bring you something often takes a lot for that to happen. So, just want to honor and be respectful of that. So I would say that's a couple things that, mistakes that are easily made in our type of environment.
And I think, also you have to, you need to document everything. So it's really important that you sort of, work from a checklist, make certain you have everything there. And then also making the interim environment safe for the individual involved is something to note too, that you need to put some type of changing in shifts or whatever you can have there, because failure to do that can also bring about liability risk for a company. So you need to make certain that during the interim period, or while this is going on, that there's some type of safe work environment, some level of separation or supervision.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. If anybody else has a question, we have time for a few more. I saw another come in as we were tackling those, and I'm going to go ahead and read that one. And this question is, beyond sexual harassment, what's a small, manageable step we can take to start building a more inclusive and equitable workplace culture? I think that's a really great one to end with. So I'd honestly love each of you to tackle it.
I'll start with that one. I was told feedback is a gift, right? But it can also be one of those gifts that, you open it up and it's a box of books, or it can be a PlayStation. Right. And so it's one of those things where you better be ready. You better be ready for it. But even just by doing the action of asking is already sending a message and already making a dent, small yet mighty dent, into your culture that you're actually even wanting to hear and wanting to understand, wanting to listen. There's a lot that just do not want, or just rather, run it as, I stand in my ivory tower, or more of a dictatorial type of relationship. And so if you're talking about inclusivity, that's behavioral, right? To make someone feel inclusive, right? You can't really say you're inclusive. There's other people who have to tell you that you are, right? And as far as equity goes too, oftentimes it gets, kind of muddied with the word equality. Equality is one thing, equal footing. Equity is a whole nother thing, where you're recognizing that there's certain handicaps that are in place, or certain biases, that are just floating around and impacting your people. But you're never really going to get to the heart of it until you actually ask for feedback. But do not ask for feedback just for the sake of asking for feedback, or you're just trying to play chess here and get some brownie points. But if you're asking for feedback with the intent not only to listen, but also to act, like you have to follow through with the full sentence, not just the subject. And it also needs a predicate. They follow through with the full sentence of exercising that feedback. That is a great way. Very low cost, very, very manageable. And it's maybe even something that you can actually start creating family meetings around. Family meaning, your staff, and make that also be part of of a discussion thread. Those to me are just some very, small, also manageable steps, but you have to be ready for it.
I love that idea of feedback, Opal. Actually, yesterday I saw this, not to get like super philosophical here, but I saw this quote that said, when you get defensive about feedback, you fail twice. You fail to learn today, and you fail to encourage people to come back to you with feedback tomorrow. Basically, was it in a nutshell. But totally right on with what you just said there. I think being sincere in that is just like at the end of the day, wanting to be better every single day is important, and that's sort of a philosophy I've lived by in my life and as a brewery owner, is just wanting and really the desire to learn and evolve and be the best that we can possibly be. I'll kind of comment and piggyback something else you kind of closed with there, Opal, around sort of like the family meeting. I think, I will say you got to be careful around that concept of family. I had a situation really early on, probably 2 years into us being open, where we had one location. It was like 10 or 12 employees. There was a head chef and a manager that were full-time. Everybody else was part-time. Like, it felt like a very small, tight-knit team, but we had some challenges with our manager. And when time came to take action and let that person go, the other employees were sort of that, like, how could you do that? We're a family kind of thing. And it took a lot. So you really got to be careful in balancing that culture. Like, yes, it's a family, but we're also a high functioning team that we don't tolerate certain things. And unfortunately, those situations arise. So be careful of falling too much into that trap, because it took, I'll be honest, I think the person that was most affected by it never really got over it, and ended up leaving the organization maybe about a year later. But it never felt quite the same. And that was a learning thing for me as a business owner of, we want to be, tight knit and a family kind of feel, but there's limits to that. And at the end of the day, we're a business and we need to look out for everybody's safety, in everybody's, sense of belonging and community and all that. And the person just truly wasn't fostering that, wasn't living those values, that unfortunately ended in a different way than, some thought maybe it should.
Great point. Thanks, Bill.
Excellent.
Scott, want to take us home?
Yeah, I'll take us home. I think Opal and Bill did a great job with that, and I definitely don't want to follow on Bill after he does one of these quotable moments about failing twice with feedback. So it just, I've only known Bill for a short period of time, but I really appreciate the wisdom and experience that he brings us. Where I was going to go with this is, first of all, let you know that we've covered a lot of material. This is going to be recorded. People that are, active members of the CBT know that you can go out and access this. What I wanted to offer up is that if you need any more details on Rapid or the documents or some of these points, I'm always available in terms of if you want to reach out, in some fashion and say you'd like some more material on something, or I'd like to run another question by you. We've covered a lot of material today. We've also put some actions out there where hopefully it'll prompt you to start moving in directions in terms of making your company better positioned to be a safe environment. Really appreciate the time people have spent on this call. So thank you.
Awesome. No, Scott, once again, if anyone's interested in learning more about WeVow, how can they do so?
One thing they could do is the QR code will take you out to WeVow. We're also, it's wevow.com. So you can look us up, and we've got information in terms of the offerings we have that are very tailored. We've got a large presence in the craft brewery space. We've been doing it for a number of years, and we've got supporting material that comes with it. And we've also got an option if you're very lean and you don't have any HR type of capabilities that we provide. If an incident is reported, you have a resource that you can reach out to.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Scott. And once again, everybody, that's wevow.com. And Opal, if people are interested in learning all the cool things that you're doing in this world, how can they follow you?
You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active out on there. And actually, I'm one of those people who kind of work behind the scenes, really advising other HCM, companies or HCM adjacent companies, to how they go to market, and also considering the worker, the person that is on the ground and not necessarily, in the back office, but really, understanding that employee experience is very paramount for any guest experience. So really trying to make sure that their strategy also matches that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Opal. And Bill, I hope to visit your brewery someday, but for anyone kind of seeing all the things you're doing at Rising Storm, how can they follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. You could certainly check us out online, risingstormbrewing.com, or on Instagram or Facebook, Rising Storm Brewing, or Rising Storm at the Mill, which is our second location in a 175-year-old historic flour mill. So kind of a cool rebuild that we did to that. Or if you have specific questions, Bill at risingstormbrewing.com is a great place to email me. So, certainly hope to see you, Andrew.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Scott, Opal, and Bill, thank you once again. You can learn more at WeVow.com. And everybody, we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this session, we'd love to see you in real life. We host in-person workshops across the country for craft beer professionals just like you that are held in some of the most exciting beer destinations around. These immersive events are designed to help you grow and connect with others. You'll meet peers from across the country and leave with actionable strategies for success. Connection has never been more important, and you can learn more at cbpconnects.com. Cheers. See you there.